Well, back to what could have been a replay of the Saturday night massacre of Nixon.
Well, there are two extraordinary facts that just blew me away. One is that, again, Bush doesn't know until Wednesday afternoon, when the deadline is Thursday, that Justice is not buying this. Now, you recall at the time John Ashcroft is in the hospital. Jim Comey is the acting Attorney General. We all know about the famous visit to Ashcroft's sickbed by Andy Card, the Chief of Staff, Alberto Gonzales, the White House counsel. Now I know why. The president comes back from a campaign swing in Cleveland, is told, well, we've got a problem. Actually, Jim Comey won't go along with this thing that Ashcroft has signed all this time. And in fact, Card, Gonzales, and Cheney and Addington know that Ashcroft is backing Comey in this. It appears that the president doesn't know this. That's why he dispatches his two guys to the hospital bed and say, well, I don't know what's up with this. Gonzales and Card. I don't know what's up with this Comey fella, but let's just go bring it to Ashcroft. Ashcroft, everyone knows now, backed Comey. What I found out about the hospital visit, I mean, I got a lot more detail about it, and that's a lengthy scene in the book, is that Ashcroft said something much more dramatic than just, I'm backing Jim Comey. He said, if I knew then what I knew now, and I didn't know it because you didn't tell me, I never would have signed off on this program in the first place. Now, Jim Comey, Jack Goldsmith, others at the top of Justice and the FBI considered it so outrageous that the president would try to go around the acting attorney general to a sick man in the hospital, that they were preparing to resign as of Wednesday night. And Andy Card knew that too. Thursday, the president signs a brand new order rewritten by David Addington, because this whole thing was operated out of Cheney's office, not out of White House. The documents were actually written and stored in a vault in the room 268 of the executive office, Eisenhower building next to the White House. That's Addington's office. Addington rewrites the thing because they don't have a legal certification from Justice. And now it's it's a very in-your-face document he writes. It says, notwithstanding anything that Justice may say, and notwithstanding any purported limit on the president from the judicial or legislative branches, the president, as chief law enforcement officer of the nation, authorizes this. And so Bush, on March 11th, signs a renewal of the program and says, we're marching ahead, whatever Justice says. So Jim Comey writes a resignation letter, and I got a copy of that letter. I reproduce it in the book. And the uprising spreads. There are about 24 people who are getting ready to resign, including the director of the FBI, the chief lawyer for the CIA, and quite a lot of people, at least the 5 top layers of leadership at Justice. Bush also does not know that when he signs. And he finds out almost by accident, because Condi Rice finds out by accident in a sort of chain that I describe in the book, that there's big trouble at Justice. She tells Bush 7:30 Friday morning, you better talk to Jim Comey because there's something going on at Justice. And hour and a half later, Bush calls Comey into his private office and said, what's going on? Because I had access to contemporary notes and emails and other sorts of accounts, I'm able to reproduce the conversation that Comey had with Bush pretty closely. And each of them gets a really big surprise. Comey is stunned when the president says, I just wish you weren't raising this at the last minute, day before the deadline. Which is sort of unbelievable. I mean, Comey has been fighting this battle for 3 months. And he does not believe in resignation threats, Comey told me. He believes that you shouldn't try to blackmail your way to a policy win. If you don't feel comfortable, you should just leave. But suddenly he's feeling like, I can't count on the idea that George Bush knows what's happening here. So he says, Mr. President, I think you ought to know that Director Mueller at the FBI is going to resign today. Bush is just stunned to hear that. He has no idea. And so he calls in Mueller. Mueller says, yeah, I'm sorry. I cannot execute an order that Justice tells me is illegal. upholding the criminal laws of the United States is actually the prime directive of the FBI. And Bush says no mas. He caves. He said he reverses an order that he had written very in your face, or that he had signed, less than 24 hours earlier. And this is a remarkable moment in presidential history. I'm unable to find any precedent for a time when the president in wartime, or what he considered wartime, gave an order that he considered very high priority, and was forced by his subordinates to back down the very next day or anytime. The significance of this, and this is not me talking, this is the president's senior political advisors, including Dan Bartlett, his political counselor, is that if Bush had not discovered Friday morning and had not reversed himself Friday morning, then his presidency was over. It was March of 2004. None of the people I talked to who were Bush's political advisors think he would have been reelected. You know, look, Nixon lost 3 senior Justice Department officials, and they called that the Saturday Night Massacre. This would have been a couple of dozen, and the FBI director. I think that's closer to suicide than a massacre.
And in the time that we have left, did it have any impact on his relationship with Cheney from then on?
I think it did. I can't know what was said between them and the aftermath of that, but what I can know is what the president said to others and how he behaved. And that was a turning point in a kind of trajectory of the Cheney Vice Presidency, in which he had enormous power to drive policy early on, and by around the midpoint of these 8 years, he began to lose some influence. Bush still valued his opinion and his experience, but he realized that this guy had a potential to lead him off a cliff, and he had to subject Cheney's advice to a few other filters and levels of scrutiny.
Well, we're going to have to do part 2 another time. We haven't even begun to talk about the war in Iraq, but we're going to